Hi all. The World Championship candidates is got another boring draw recently, so let's look at the Nakamura match instead. As a decisive win in the King's Engine in round 3. So Ruslan playing white played d4, and Hikaru Nakamura is, to my mind, one of the more exciting GMs around, and he's achieved a fantastic, FIDE rating in the world top 10 now as well, so it can only be good for the game. He plays the King's Engine defence again, despite losing in an earlier round. But what has he got up his sleeve? Well, instead of the mainline classical variation with like knight c6 here, he plays a viable alternative, an increasingly viable alternative, which I myself lost to in one of the recent league seasons for Muswell Hill. I was playing white and I had to play against this knight a6 move. It's got quite a bit of venom, this particular system for black. It's another way of playing the King's Engine defence. So what did Ruslan play to knight a6? He played actually rook e1. Now, when I was looking at some stem games of GMs, often a plan effective against this is c5 and taking on a6 to cripple the structure. So the question is, will that occur in this game? Well, how will it be arranged if it does occur? First, white actually puts his other bishop on e3, which is tempting this kind of knight dance, to attack the bishop. The bishop might go back, and then later the knight might, come back to either h6 or f6. There's a knight dance being encouraged here with this bishop e3. So actually bishop g5 and now f6. Bishop now actually goes to h4. And after queen e8, white's not actually going to attack the knight with h3 or anything else. He just actually plays c5. So we see now that knight a6 is explicitly, addressed as an issue in its own right. How dare black put a knight on a6? Is it going to be like the doubling of pawns? And this has, worked even, in past, 2700 games or 2600 games, where black has been kind of crushed because of this simple idea of doubling the pawns. So what will be black's compensation? Well, he takes on c5, white takes on e5 first, and takes on e5 again, and we see one isolated pawn, and now we see the structure changing quite radically after this bishop a6. If we examine this structure, we've got double pawns here, isolated pawn here. Doesn't look good structurally. And not only that, white has d-file pressure, so queen d6, of course white's slightly better, but black's got the two bishops in a dynamic looking position. c4, as well as saving a pawn, sort of highlighting d3, the pawn can be protected with bishop e6. It's not all bad, but it looks fairly ugly, okay, you've got to say. Rook ad1 and bishop e6, and now bishop g3, putting more pressure on that poor e5 pawn. And if, natural move trying to defend like e5, bishop f7, there might be queen d7. So the bishop's got a duty of care to protect d7 here. So Naka actually does a more interesting move. He plays rook f7 with the idea he's going to go for winning in the exchange. And white's up for that as well, losing the exchange for like a pawn, potentially, getting another pawn later. He plays actually bishop takes e5, allowing Naka's bishop g4 move, hitting the rook, and also, creating a discovered attack on e5 to play bishop e5. So white sacrifices the exchange, and here's the critical bit though, which I think Ruslan went wrong in the game. Easy to sort of say with engine analysis, of course, but in theory apparently he could have just taken the bishop with advantage. I'll put on Houdini or something here to show you that in this position, well, he played actually bishop f6, but there's a key idea which the engine's highlighted, that basically if you do take with rook takes d1 here, so whatever way black would capture here, you know, e5 is going to be potentially strong because of like knight e4 to f6 here, and it's really kind of nasty for black. Either knight e4 or something else, but knight e4, you know, it's enough compensation for the exchange. The control of the d file, the f6 square and the d6 squares from the knight being able to poke in, or even c5 to protect the pawn if it ever goes to e6. These are all useful things for white. So this kind of position, even f4 is actually possible here to protect the pawn. It's going to be better for white here, a small advantage to white in that scenario. But this wasn't kind of played. After bishop takes d1, bishop f6 was played. It was with a different idea, a seemingly promising idea, that basically the bishop can be reinforced with e5, and again white will be getting a strong knight. The problem with the idea is the counter, you know, positional sacrifice which black has available, and which Naka used later on in this game. He can counter sacrifice on f6. So how did the game evolve? Bishop g4, e5. So white has sacrificed the exchange, but Naka's able to control here the light squares and keep a blockade on that e pawn. He plays queen d7 to start off with. So no e6 just yet, they'll drop the queen. So knight e4, and now bishop f5. And the idea, it's really undermining this f6, making way for this positional sack, rook takes f6 to happen. So we see now, immediately in fact, black's threatening to win a piece with bishop e4 and queen d6 and then rook f6. So there's immediate pressure on f6. And Ruslan's next move really allows this positional counter sacrifice to happen. After queen b4, first Naka takes on e4 to make sure that rook f6 now is going to be more powerful, forcing like ef. But first, he again threatens rook f6 without being a sacrifice, simply to threaten to win a piece, because it's just threatening because the pawn's pinned. So f3, and now, and only now, rook f6, and black with rook f6, and this is engine approved, seizes the advantage. He timely, you know, counter sack of the exchange, advantage to black. Anything else would be letting white maybe consolidate the position, you know, win a pawn, and that's going to be enough, or it's going to be a draw or something. But this is the right time after f3, perfect timing for rook takes f6, advantage to black straight away, theoretically. Takes on e4, regains one of his pawns and keeps hold of the c4 pawn. So the f6 is now loose and the ball is in black's court now. It seems simple, doesn't it? It seems as though, what was that, just you know, just one slightly poor decision from white, not factoring in perhaps in Naka's resourcefulness to, you know, to sacrifice the exchange on f6 to reach this position. So although the pawns are ugly, it's white's pawn here which is weak, this f6 pawn. White's only got 5 pawns here. You know, black is technically a pawn up, but with 2 sets of double pawns, it's quite dramatic. But this pawn being vulnerable is like a key thing. So queen b7, check, and now this pawn drops immediately. Doesn't matter about losing one of the double pawns to Naka surely. So check, loses one of the double pawns to check. King e6, and doesn't mind losing the a6 pawn here. If he loses the a6 though, there's queen takes b2, so that's going to be protected. So queen b7. So how does Naka win this? Interesting. He is a pawn up. He just plays check, check, check. Where are these checks going, you may wonder? Well, it's c3 now, so he's undoubling his pawns with advantage and still being able to get a barrage of checks going pretty soon. So check, 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 check. And you might wonder, what's the point of the checks? It's to get rid of the queens. After queen g5 check, the queens are going to come off with queen f5, leaving black with a trivially won king and pawn ending. So here white resigned. Just to show you why that's trivially won, I'll try and demonstrate. you know, even if white loses that pawn there, I think he can go for a2. I'm just going to engine check this, but I think he can just go for, or just queen this pawn. Actually, he doesn't even need to go to a2. Just creates a shield of squares. So if white just takes, then you just queen the pawn, c5. This pawn's going to delay these two, so this is going to be, it's trivial. It's pawn's queening. So that was pretty neat counter sack. It makes it look as though that was a basic wrong decision there about the exchange sack was good in principle. The idea of completely damaging, wrecking black's pawn structure was good in principle. But if this move bishop e5 needs to be follow-up, the follow-up needs to be accurate. So the follow-up, bishop g7, after bishop takes d1, simply rook takes d1 seems to be a logical improvement on this game for white to maintain a small advantage. So the way it was played with bishop f6, it's giving this option of the positional sacrifice all the time. Basically, just needs the configuration to change slightly for that to become evident, for rook f6 to become evident as a major issue. After rook e8, f3, now it's a major issue. Rook takes f6, black gaining the advantage, holding on to his pawns as well. The c4 pawn in particular is the important one to hold on to. So that's used for later for c3 shortly. And once c3 happens, black's a pawn up here. He just needs to get the queens off. Okay, good stuff for the King's Indian player, showing there's hope really for this alternative. This knight a6 can be punted successfully instead of knight c6. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube, and check out facebook.com/King's Indian Defense. Thanks very much.